Hey, my name is Kath, and I live in this van. I spent 4.5 months in 2020 building out the best small van build ever. Maybe. Now I'm taking you back to show you what I did. I started by taking out the shelving, cleaning all the mud and dirt, doing rush treatment, then painting the inside. Here is where I made my first mistake. I didn't know you need to sand before painting, so all that paint peeled right off. So then I took days to sand off all the fresh paint and the old paint, often having to stop every 10 seconds because I was weak and it was tough work and I wasn't particularly good at it. I would not say it is the best painting job in the world, but somehow I finished it with minor injury. Finishing touches. There's no way for me to describe how happy I am that I am not painting anymore. There's a few little spots where I need to touch some things up that aren't great or perfect, but I have not seen out of these windows in like a week. So I'm so happy just to be able to like take off all the blue tape. I'm going to be cutting a 14 by 14 square as a template to insert the MaxxAir fan on my roof. And am I terrified to cut a hole in my roof? Absolutely. It is very scary to think about cutting a hole in your roof of your car and doing it wrong and then having a hole in your roof that you can't fix. But do I have to cut a hole in my roof? Yes, to have airflow, especially because I'm here in Florida most of the time and it will be very hot in the summer. I'll be putting the fan towards the back of the car, and then the solar panels I will have will be on each side of the fan, and the solar panels will sit on top of the deck that I'm planning on building. So let's get started. First, I started by measuring out the right dimensions for the hole on some cardboard to use as a template using this carpenter square. This is one of those moments that you definitely measure 2 times and check 3 times before cutting a huge hole in the roof of your vehicle. After, I cut some furring strips to have something besides the thin metal roof as support to hold up the fan. Because of the way my roof is, I ended up not making a complete square, but instead did one long piece on each side of the fan. I then taped off the same area as my template and drilled a hole at each of the 4 corners. On the roof, I taped off the same area using the same 4 pilot holes to align and make sure that the correct area was being cut. Then it was time to cut the full square by connecting the 4 pilot holes. One of the tips I did unsuccessfully is to use tape to hold the places you already cut in place to help prevent the metal from moving or falling while you're working. This project took longer than expected because the butyl tape that is used between the fan and the roof to seal out water made several of the drill bits break off and get stuck in the roof. At the beginning of the build, it was rough. I was nervous, I didn't have any experience, and I wasn't familiar with tools. After finally drilling through the MaxxAir fan and roof and putting the butyl tape and screws in, it was time to lap seal over the screws and try and fill the big gaps in the ribs of my roof. You can see what I mean about the ribs making it difficult to make the square furring strip support and why I used 4 individual pieces instead. I believe there are kits now that you can buy to make this easier, but in 2020 they were harder to find and expensive. The next day, I took a few minutes in the sun to relax before starting on my floors. When you're building a van, it's going to cost you way more than you can anticipate. One of those costs is in wood. Here I am checking out the wood grain to see if it's something that I will like and the designs will show up well with the stain and the urethane. I would suggest if you ever build a van to live very close to a Lowe's or a Home Depot, because you will likely be going to the store at least once a day and sometimes 3 times a day. So today I'm going to go ahead. I cut out the template last night for the floor. I'm going to be putting plywood floor on the bottom of the van, on the floor of the van. to give it some stability for everything that's going to be going inside of it. I want the plywood to fit perfectly, so I have this old mat here. Last night I went ahead and took some old cardboard boxes. I taped them all together, and then I laid this mat on top of the cardboard boxes, outlined, and then cut the same shape. Here I am with my template that I cut after taping together a bunch of cardboard boxes so it would be the right size, and then tracing it with the mat that came in the van. I tested it out by putting it inside the van and making sure that it fit properly. Actually, you can see I got it all in. It is only missing some parts here. I guess the mat didn't go in this spot, but this is why you cut a template first, so that way you don't cut into your plywood, because plywood is pretty expensive, and then have a big hole there. Overall, fits pretty well. I'm going to be so happy to start putting things into the van instead of just destroying the van all the time. I am so tired of sanding and painting and destroying. I just want to start to build, and even having this cardboard on the floor makes me so happy. It makes me feel like something is happening. Lay it down, put the template on top, and outline it so that way I can take the saw and cut it to shape. This is 1/2 inch birch plywood. I wanted something that was a little more high grade, just because my philosophy with the van is I want to buy all of the nicer things, even though they're more expensive, to try and make my build as good in quality as possible, so that way I don't have any issues. I mean, we're always going to have issues, but that way I have hopefully less issues in the future. So here I am trying to find the right configuration for the template and the wood. I want to have as little cuts as possible while trying to avoid having seams showing on the floor. I was also looking at the wood grain because I was leaving my wood exposed. I wanted to make sure that I picked the nicest looking parts to show up on the floor. Luckily, I was able to make 3 pieces, one that ran along the back under the bed and one that ran under the cabinets, and the largest piece would be closest to the side entrance. That way, if there were any seams, they would be exposed less and have less of a likelihood of having water go underneath the floor. I did cut this piece correctly, but I put it in the van incorrectly, and then I ended up cutting that back piece more than necessary. But no one ever sees it, so we don't know that anyways. I put the floor in just to make sure that it all fits before I sand it smooth and then stain it and put some, every time I forget, polyurethane on it to protect it. And I decided I'm going to be leaving the wood exposed because I actually like how it looks. Plus it'll save me about 1/2 inch or 1/4 inch of height, because I won't have to put any type of laminate or anything on it to take away from additional height in the van. And yeah, look at this. What do you think? There is a bit of a gap here, but I mean, I think overall it's good. The bed will be over these spots. Won't even see it. So excited. Yeah. After I did a whole bunch of sanding and staining on the floor, and then that evening we had an entry into our sad girl diaries. I have not had a radio in the van for like 2 weeks because the radio was old. It it literally only had a radio. That's it. And when you turn the volume down, volume didn't go down. It went everywhere. You turn the volume up, didn't go up, went everywhere. You would just need to be lucky that it landed on like the number you wanted. So I bought a radio and it didn't fit. So then I cut off the inside of my dashboard to make it fit, and then it fit. And then the Bluetooth didn't work. That's after I wired the entire thing together. So then I bought a more expensive radio. Maybe that radio was cheap. And tested everything, like the Bluetooth and whatnot. And then it didn't fit properly still. It wouldn't hold in the dashboard. So search online for days. Finally find a kit that's going to actually work. So this is after I spent about an hour wiring for the second time a radio to my car. This time I even got heated wires. Look at these wires. I heated these wires so that way they would be fully attached and they would not come off, and they were very secure. I put all of these together and heated them with a lighter just so I can take it out again. And it honestly seems like that's what just keeps happening. Even when I do something as good as possible, it still is just not right. I put the polyurethane on the wood. There's bubbles. I spray painted the entire inside of the car, but this one was my fault. I forgot, or I didn't even think about sanding it before. I put the fan on the roof with the lap seal, and the lap seal falls, and now there's a gap. So the roof is leaking. And this is also between me waking up every day at 3:30 a.m., driving 20 minutes, 15 minutes to Walmart parking lot, setting up my classroom to teach, just to make some money to be able to work while I'm doing the van. For 2.5 hours. I wake up at 3:30 a.m. and I work from 4:30 a.m. until 7 a.m. And then I come home and I work on the van the entire evening. Oh, I forgot to say, it also stopped in the middle of the road the other day. Never had that happen in 15 years of me driving. 15 years of me driving. I have never had one of my 4 cars. This is my 4th car. I've never had one of my other 3 cars ever stop in the middle of the road and shut down. I'm sure everything will work out.
Some of the only tips I could offer you at this point for sanding and staining and urethaning is always buy more sandpaper than you think you need, and make sure you always clean your brushes immediately, or you'll buy way too many.
On the agenda for today, I went ahead and I already sanded the back of the floor, and I put some spar urethane on it. This way, if any water goes under the floor or comes up, or there's any humidity or condensation, hopefully the board will be protected and the floor will be protected and it won't absorb any of that moisture and water. I'm going to be sanding it down and doing a second coat. I have duct tape on my fingers because despite wearing gloves almost all the time, my hands are very unhappy with how cold it is and how much work they're doing and all the chemicals. So I went ahead and did that, and I got some fat mat for the van, and I was going to install fat mat for sound deadening, and then I found out that the chemical makeup of fat mat is asphalt, and that it's really good for colder climates, but in warmer climates the asphalt can get hot and it can, what people said, turn your van into like a furnace. And being in Florida in summers, that would just not be a good idea, period. So I returned the fat mat and I got Kilmat. The Kilmat needs to be installed when it is more than 53 degrees. So today it should be more than 53 degrees, and I'm gonna try and install that, and hopefully that'll make riding in the car a little more enjoyable. The other thing on the agenda for today is to add some more lap seal around the MaxxAir fan. I added quite a bit of lap seal that I felt was necessary, but it fell, and then in these grooves here, it fell, and then it kind of made a little pocket where there is no lap seal. So I'll be adding more, especially because tomorrow it's supposed to be like a thunderstorm and raining. Hopefully we'll get all of that done today, and then maybe I can start either on the roof, because I have big plans for the roof, or I'm going to try my third radio. This is my third one. No radios want to work in this car, but we'll try again until it does work, and then I'll have music again.
I put more lap seal in those ribbed areas around the fan where it had fallen and started to leak. Then I took the cardboard floor template out of the van because it was time to start the sound deadening process. After reading the directions, I used mineral spirits to clean the areas where I would be putting the Kilmat. One of the steps that I see a lot of people miss when they stick on sound deadener is they do not roll it out. It is a long and strenuous task, but it is what seals it to the metal and ensures that it is working properly. While working on the sound deadener, I was also going back and forth sanding and reapplying more urethane in between coats. I decided to cut and fill these lower ribbed areas with the Kilmat rather than the entire floor, not only so I didn't have to use as much, but that way I could try and level out the surface of the floor to avoid creaking and warping of the wood that I would inevitably put on top of it.
Right now I am trying to seal around these holes in the van. Cargo vans have a lot of these holes in the bottom of the floor where they have attached like shelving and all of the metal cabinets that I actually originally had in here. What I'm using, luckily, because my parents work in the car industry, so they were aware of these, which are actually body plugs. That's their intention, is to fill these holes that are inside the van floor. So I've popped them in all of the holes. That was one of the first things I did, and now I'm just going to silicone around them just to make sure that they like don't wobble or move, and then hopefully make sure that they're just more secure and there's no water that drips in or anything like that. I'm going to try and install the floor today. I'm a bit nervous about installing the floor because I have plywood that I have stained and put polyurethane on instead of covering it up with some type of vinyl or like snap-in flooring a lot of people do. I wanted to save the height, and then also I felt that the floor looked nice, looked fine, just wood the way it is. Maybe I'll change my mind later, who knows. So originally I wasn't going to put any type of insulation on the floor, just because Mainly I'm in Florida, and then it's going to take from the height. But I did find this here. I found this here, which is very thin. It's 1/4 inch, and I believe it's XPS. It doesn't actually say it on here, but I went on their website and I checked it out. And XPS is what you need to use because EPS absorbs water. Mainly, I'm putting this on the floor because I wanted to make it like a little more cushiony rather than just having plywood on top of metal. And then I wanted to have some type of barrier between the plywood and the floor, so it wouldn't be just straight plywood on a cold or a hot metal floor. So there'd be some type of barrier there. I'm going to take this and use my floor template that I've been using to protect the floor. And I'm gonna cut out the foam, and then I will silicone the floor to the ground, or to the floor in the van, because supposedly XPS will squeak under the floor if you don't properly adhere it to the floor.
I duct taped pieces of the XPS together to make one piece large enough for the entire wood template for the floor. Then I traced it out and cut around the outline that I had done. After doing that, I brought it into the van and I adhered it to the floor with silicone. This is one of those steps that I wasn't certain I was doing right, and who knows what it looks like under the floor right now, but it seems to be doing well enough. After I finished siliconing it to the floor, I took the plywood that I had finished, put it in the van to make a lot of surface tension, and then put weights on top to help it stay down and stick while it dried.
So right now what I'm going to try and do is cover these wheel wells. I want to put something into the van because the barn is just completely filled. I want to start putting things in, so I'm going to try and put the floors in. Originally what I was going to do is cover these wheel wells with a box, and the van is so small already, I didn't want to take any additional space and make it unusable. So instead what I will be doing is covering the wheel wells with this felt. I'll be putting some adhesive on the side of the felt and on the wheel well, and then trying to nicely lay it on there. We'll see how nice that ends up. After that, I will permanently put the floors in, and I will silicone around the floors. These seams that are around the floors shouldn't be seen once everything is in, because the seam that runs this way will be covered by the cabinets, and the seam right here will be covered by the bed. So the only part of the floor that will be exposed will be this part over here, and this is one nice big cut piece, so hopefully it'll look nice. Well, let's get started.
As you can tell, I am dragging and having a rough time continuing through this work, but here we are. We prosper. I used Gorilla Glue to stick the felt onto the Kilmat and cover the wheel wells. It really helped clean up the look of the floor without taking much room away from the van, and I'm really happy that I ended up doing this because my original plan was to create a box around the wheel wells, and it would have greatly limited my space. I started freediving after building the van, and my freediving fins actually go perfectly over the wheel well, and they wouldn't have had any space if I had covered it up with a box. The felt is still holding up pretty well after the last 5 years, and I would suggest this as a cheap, easy way to cover your wheel wells and make them look a little nicer.
So, just got done wiring everything for the hopefully final time. I used the heat shrink tubing to secure everything. I just twisted the wires. I was trying to originally solder them, but unfortunately this this little welder, this little soldering iron gun is not very good. So I went ahead and I twisted them and then heat sealed the tubing. Once again, I was going to heat seal the tubing with the soldering iron, but I used the old-fashioned lighter. And that worked out well. So I'm going to take it and install my radio. I'm going to be so happy to actually have a radio that's like in my car that hopefully should work exactly the way that it should and isn't sitting on my cup holder, because that's where my radio has been sitting for the last day. It's just sitting on my cup holder while I listen to it. It's not very good for breaking. I went ahead and I grounded all of the, these are all three of these wires here are all different grounds. One is an illumination ground. Finally, time to install the radio. So, whenever I was talking about how I had to cut and Dremel it, right here, there is this lip. There used to be a lip up here, and then also there used to be some metal up here that I had to go ahead and remove to get it to fit. Okay, and this is the dash kit that I said once you put it in, it says in the manual that it will not be able to be removed. That's all for today, folks. That's actually not all for today. I have a bunch of other projects that I have to do for the van, but that's all for this.